Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Rosanne Haggerty is a relentless, optimistic, innovative visionary who believes that homelessness is a preventable condition. Her commitment to ending it began 25 years ago in Times Square, and now as president of Community Solutions, she works to realize her dream that in this country, everyone has a home. And she's my guest today, and welcome.
Thank you.
So Community Solutions, you've just hit a goal you set, what, 4 years ago, of homes for 100,000 homeless people across the country.
Yeah, we
Amazing.
just last week announced that we're at actually 101,628, and that represents the work of 238 communities around the country who've been part of this movement.
It's amazing. And these are people who are the most vulnerable. These are basically long-term homeless people who have severe mental health problems, all kinds of problems, right?
Exactly. The point of the movement was to mobilize communities around the fact that long-term homelessness is an urgent public health issue, and we were able to help communities draw the connection between the health conditions that were being experienced by people living on the street for long periods of time and the urgency of getting people directly into homes. So the 100,000 Homes campaign was really a scale-up of the housing first notion, which is that housing should be unconditional, and that in some ways, it took us a long time to learn this, but people everywhere do better at caring for themselves if they have a stable place to live. And we'd had it wrong and reversed it for a long time.
So that's, instead of asking for all the papers, you go to a homeless person and you want to know where their birth certificate is. Oh, yes, I have it in this pile of paper here, right?
Yeah.
And that they, and also you found out that they'd go to the hospital and then they wouldn't be connected, so they go back on the street after that.
Exactly. It was this complete broken system that we realized was the thing that needed to be overcome in community after community. That, we have housing authorities and mayor's offices and the VA and not-for-profits, everyone with the best of intentions, but no one actually connecting up so that people who were stuck in homelessness had a clear pathway to getting into a stable home where from that place they could be connected with the health and mental health supports that would be much more likely to stick given the basic stability.
And it's financially much better for a community or a government.
Oh, it makes sense for everyone, Ronnie. There have been studies in cities throughout the country federally that show when you house a long-term homeless person that it saves everyone money as well as improving the quality of life and giving people a chance at a life of purpose and contribution again. So it's one of these issues that really shouldn't be political at all. It's just common sense.
So when you graduated from college, you moved to Manhattan? And you lived on the West Side? Is that what happened?
I lived in Times Square. I thought I was coming here for a year,
Yeah.
and it was part of a volunteer program working at a shelter for homeless young people.
Yeah, and then suddenly, what happened?
Well, that year was pretty transformative in the sense that realized that despite all these good intentions around helping young people in crisis, that their homelessness was not a short-term problem, that we were seeing kids just go right back to the street. And so that made me pretty troubled, frankly, that that the good intentions and even the very good care people were receiving for the period of time they were in the shelter was not adding up to anything like a solution. So that made me interested in housing and just kind of followed that line ever since, like housing and what else besides housing, and what if housing isn't the only answer? What if we need actually well-functioning community systems?
So it's been a whole progression. It's fascinating.
Exactly.
But it was the Times Square Hotel, which is a great big hotel. It's a big hotel.
Right. Well, that was actually the first project undertaken by the not-for-profit I started back in 1990, which was called Common Ground, and still doing great work here in the city. And the Times Square Hotel was about taking this bankrupt and decrepit place and showing that it could be transformed into really a new approach to housing, which was not just connecting affordable housing with supports, but also integrating that type of environment to make it attractive and amenable to people who were working in the creative industries in New York and hotel business. So we created a big mixed income approach that made it possible for people to really kind of reintegrate and normalize into the community again. And happily was part of the whole resurgence of Times Square too. So that's a part of the story.
And then you just, Common Ground continued, and they established that you did the Prince George Hotel, which has this great,
the Andrews.
I remember when the Prince George was in the SRO, and there was a strike with I guess, the communication workers. And I was in the hotel for some reason to look for a woman who was living there temporarily. And I think some electricians or communications workers from the South were living there while they were filling in for the union people. And this young couple comes in there. They had a Fodor's. It was an old Fodor's, you know, and they came in to live there, and they saw this mayhem, and it was, but now it's a beautiful place.
Yep.
And
beautiful place with a beautiful ballroom that
all these
lots
things.
of people use for events.
So Common Ground now has many facilities in this.
Right, and about 3,000 units. And then in 2011, our whole innovations group became a separate not-for-profit, Community Solutions. And
so we went from there to Community Solutions. That's when you decided that, what? That
well, we had started working back in the early 2000s on the question of, even with all of these lovely buildings we're building, we're still walking past many of the same people who'd been living on the street before those buildings ever opened, and started asking more and more probing questions of ourselves too, as well as people working with the homeless, and why it was that people were simply trapped on the street. And we're hearing things that I think we realized were sort of assumptions that people all over the country were making, that perhaps people, you know, didn't want help with housing. And in fact, what we learned was that the system in New York and other places was just not built to offer people help with housing. Typically, people were being offered a ride to a shelter or some other kind of assistance to get them through the day, but not help with a real solution. And I have yet to meet a homeless person living on the street in New York or any other city who doesn't know all about where the shelters are, where the soup kitchens are. That's not going to solve their problem. What will solve their problem is assistance in getting back into some stable situation. And that's something we all had to learn together. And one of the smart things I did back in those years, and this was back in 2003, is understood that as a sector we were kind of stuck in the way we were looking at the problem. And so ended up going outside our kind of normal lanes and hiring someone who had just come from the military, who had a very different way of problem solving, a way of evaluating data and really shrinking, you know, kind of the terrain to figure out the problem. And so I hired this amazing woman, Becky Canis, who, with the charge, help us figure out how to reduce street homelessness in Times Square by 2/3 in 3 years. And I think that's become a discipline for us. Not only was Becky able to lead a team doing that, but came to see that it's those really short, time-bound, collective, measurable goals that help people move forward. Otherwise, these problems just look too overwhelming, but we can chunk them down and begin to make pretty impressive progress, no matter what the problem is, if we define the scope of it correctly.
So so now you've got Common Ground. It's it's almost like a consulting company, isn't it?
Well, Community Solutions actually does a few things. We help communities solve the complex problems that affect their most vulnerable residents. And we do lead certain direct programs in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and in the north end of Hartford, Connecticut, where we're actually trying to figure out, with bringing together residents, institutions, partner not-for-profits, to how about working together around some measurable, time-bound goals to move these neighborhoods that have been trapped in poverty forward. But then nationally, we continue to work, I guess it's like on a consulting basis, but really to, in the case of the 100,000 Homes campaign, invite communities into really a movement to learn new skills, a data-based, process improvement guided way of solving problems as a team locally that no one agency could solve alone. And so we provide the support, the coaching, the data infrastructure, and see that that's really, in many cases, what's been missing. The good intentions have been there, the resources have been there, but the ways of working haven't been.
And there's a film on your website, so people should go to the website, that shows Nashville. Isn't it Nashville?
Right.
And it's a wonderful thing because you've sent out a team of people, right? Tell us, I mean, if you want to describe it. It's just a very touching film.
Yeah.
And it shows exactly what you're talking about.
Right, well actually this was featured on 60 Minutes, so it's the 60 Minutes link. And what we do, and the Nashville story is very typical, but they've been an awesome group of partners there, is we'll train a community to conduct initially something called a registry week, which is to use a public health-oriented survey to get person-specific information that will help each homeless individual in the community be identified by name and triaged into a housing solution. And then communities, we assist in prioritizing those with the greatest health vulnerabilities. And then it's a question of bringing everyone around the same table, landlords, the outreach workers, the mayor's office, the VA. And so they see what the community needs to do as opposed to one agency having its own criteria, another agency having a different set of goals. We I think, have helped to popularize the issue that this has to be a whole of community undertaking.
Was the commercial landlord who gave an apartment in a regular priced apartment house, is he unusual, or did you find that in other cities?
We have found that that is the case in very many cities, that the landlord community, who often had never really been factored into what a community's approach to homelessness could be, have been very willing to step up and have found that really exciting. Now, in communities where there are higher vacancy rates, you can imagine, you might have, and we do see more landlord groups being willing to see this as something that they can do. And typically what we hear from landlord groups and specific landlords all over the country is that they're perfectly prepared to help if someone can see that the paperwork and whatever rent supports are that they don't have to learn to deal with them, and that there's someone to call if the tenant has a difficulty. And so that's where, again, you saw in 60 minutes.
Is it financed with a Section 8 voucher, or is it different ways? They get paid rent.
Yes, let's see, we have seen everything.
You're able to bring all the governmental
yes.
subsidies or assistance together.
Exactly. Some landlords have just actually discounted to a very, very limited rate an apartment for a period of time when someone doesn't have a government benefit. But VA supportive housing, called VASH, for veterans has been a frequent way of getting people's rent paid, Shelter Plus Care, Section 8 vouchers. And then some cities have their own local rent subsidy programs. Quite a few of the individuals who've been chronically homeless are quite disabled, and so they qualify for certain subsidies, and many qualify for SSI, but because of the conditions of their lives, hadn't actually been receiving it. So again, we found that it's often not about the resources, it's about the connectivity to get the resources matched to the people who need them most.
So does I'm going back to Common Ground. Do those places that they're housing, are they the same way? I mean, they come in off the street, or in New York City, do you have to go through the shelter system? Right.
In New York City, New York was, I'd say, an early adopter of realizing that they needed to really consolidate their placement system. So any housing units, any supportive housing units that the city and state have funded through an initiative called the New York 3 Agreement, that there's been a very controlled pathway so that the most needy, chronically homeless get matched to those units. One of the things that I think New York has an opportunity to do is really to look at that very successful process and expand it to the way that all supported and assisted housing is allocated. I think
that would be
it's a smart thing to do, and I think more and more communities are realizing how precious affordable housing resources are, and they really need to be quite strategic in how they use those resources.
And then the next step after the 100,000 homes, I mean, there'll be more, but while you're doing that, you realized that you also, I mean, that's Brownsville and Hartford, right? You've got to go into a community to organize the community so you don't get the homeless people.
Right, and the origin of these efforts, Ronnie, is interesting. Once we became convinced that looking at person-specific data could actually tell us a lot about where our good intentions were falling short and just not getting the job done, we started looking in New York at where individuals and families who were becoming homeless were coming from. And when you look at where families who are going into the New York City shelter system come from, where young people in foster care, people in the criminal justice system, both very strong indicators of risks for later homelessness, we found that there were about 10 neighborhoods of New York City, and even certain blocks within those neighborhoods, who accounted for a lot of the distress. And we were like, maybe it's possible to spare individuals and families this kind of horrible distress, this trauma of homelessness, if we could get upstream to these neighborhoods and start connecting the dots there, getting institutions, residents to work together in ways that would create more security and more stability for everyone. And so that's what we've been working on.
That's a model, though, that you hear in a different way from different sources, although it's not covering everybody. I mean, what I'm thinking about is the recidivism rate in prisons, that we feel that people coming out need a supportive community, but that fits right into your program.
Absolutely.
It's not just a separate program.
Yeah, and you know, you've anticipated, I think, what our big aha was, which is, I think the thing that prevents homelessness is a strong community. It's not a certain type of program. It's basically a community where people aren't falling through the cracks, where it's not normal for people to not have anywhere to turn but a government program when they're in distress, that there are, you know, functioning local institutions, confident and engaged neighbors. And so that's what I think is a really hopeful direction for all of our work, all of our collective work on the part of people who are looking to make the world better for people who are struggling.
Now, a large segment of the chronically homeless are veterans?
Well, yes,
Is that true?
That's true, but fortunately, it's a diminishing number. The VA has done a very, very good job of targeting resources and stepping up to this pledge to end veteran homelessness by the end of 2015. So there are about 57,000 homeless veterans left in the country, but veteran homelessness has come down by about 24% in recent years. And so there really is exciting progress being made there. And over 31,000 actually of the 100,000 individuals who were housed through the campaign are veterans. And so we just began actually at the end of March working with the VA and other partners to, with 25 cities with very high rates of veteran homelessness still, to get to 0 by the end of 2015. New York is one of those cities and is doing very, very well on reducing veteran homelessness.
So do you take apartments from other people? I mean, when you find a place, a home for somebody, is there somebody waiting on a list someplace else?
Well, you know, that's an
It's
interesting
hard,
question. You know, there are certain communities where there is just too short a supply of affordable housing. In many communities around the country, though, we see that it's simply a failure to optimize their resources, and that there are actually quite significant vacancy rates, which makes no sense in an environment where you have individuals and families who are homeless. And so we've seen that the ability to connect the dots is what many cities lacked. And as far as, you know, actually having better information on homelessness, one of the exciting things is it can tell cities where they really do have a gap and what the nature of that gap is, as opposed to just thinking, oh, we need a more affordable housing. You can get a sense of, you know, the amount, the type. One of the things that New York and other cities, I think, are beginning to wrestle with is that with an aging population and so many single-person households, they need more housing that's maybe designed and built for single adults and not so many, you know, large apartments and the like.
Yeah. Are you involved in the mayor's plan for increasing affordable housing?
Well, to the degree that you know, we in our work in Brownsville are very committed to being a good partner in improving housing opportunities in that community, yes, we are.
Are they listening to you for suggestions about what to do?
Well, we've had just
I
great
hope so.
conversations with many of the new commissioners, and I think everyone's on the same page and appreciating not just the need for more affordable housing, but to aim that at people who really can't be competitive in the housing market without very intentional support. And I was pleased to see in the plan there's a whole section devoted to breaking through the bottlenecks, because we see that that is a big hidden opportunity in New York and many other cities, that there are just so many process steps that agencies have imposed, not understanding the ramifications if other agencies also add their requirements and steps, that it actually makes it very hard for individuals who are struggling to get through that process. So the more streamlined we can help cities like New York make their housing process, there'll be a benefit in terms of more people getting what they need quicker.
So it's not just the Agency for Homeless Services.
No,
it's
no,
not
no.
just our HRA for research. It's they got to work together.
Yeah,
right.
I think our big
Parole
aha,
and everybody.
yeah, was that housing is not just a product; it's a process. How you get into housing. I mean, you and I can go to Craigslist, but if you have, you know, don't have a security deposit, if you don't have the
You don't have a
wherewithal,
computer to look
exactly,
quickly.
and you're relying on government assisted housing, you know, it's not a well-aligned process. but we can make it so and actually save a lot of money and save a lot of grief for people who are struggling by getting a well-aligned system in place.
So there was a lot of studying on your part that went into this, right?
For years, yes.
I mean, you didn't just finish at college and not go on. What kind of I'm always interested in where people come from and how they got to be doing these things.
Yeah, well, I think I tend to be one of those people who learns by doing and reflecting, but after college I went to Columbia to get a master's in real estate development, and then I have started a PhD program in sociology at NYU, and that was actually instrumental once I started thinking about what's the larger system that homelessness and housing exists within, and so that opportunity has been really important to shaping my thinking.
It's really incredible that you can do that. Did you come from a home that was very community-oriented and activist?
In a sense, yes. My parents, both amazing people, my mom's still alive, very much, I think, inspired by Catholic social teachings, and were always kind of collecting people in need, and our family was always, inclusive of people who were living at single-room occupancy hotels and who were struggling with things. But they never really talked about it. They just did it.
They did it.
And so, but I think that has been a big influence on my siblings' lives and mine.
Yeah. So what is the next project beyond the veterans? What else? What are some of the other things that you've discovered in this whole traveling?
Well, beyond the Veterans Initiative, which is already underway, we are also looking to help communities end chronic homelessness. There's still about 92,000 chronically homeless people living in the United States, and we'd like to see that end by the end of 2016. And we know that many of these amazingly productive and committed communities who are part of the 100,000 Homes campaign are really looking to see what's next and want to be part of really solving this problem in the country. And so we're beginning to shape that next effort. And then in Brownsville and in the neighborhood in Hartford, we are moving toward big time-bound goals to help move the needle there. And so in Brownsville later this year, we'll be launching the 5,000 Jobs campaign to get 5,000 residents of Brownsville who are now out of the workforce into jobs by the end of 2017. And in Hartford, we're looking at ways to take this neighborhood with a population of about 10,600 residents with the worst health indicators in the state of Connecticut, and how we turn that around in a measurable, meaningful way by the end of 2017 as well.
We were talking earlier about putting the different areas of concern together. So in Brownsville, I mean, would you do things like training for retrofitting jobs? Or I don't mean just job training. I mean, like you, put a person in an apartment and they'll learn.
Yeah.
So give a person a job and they're going to learn how to do it, right?
Exactly. Our approach in Brownsville and in Hartford is much like the 100,000 Homes campaign, is the convener, the data people, the connector. I don't feel that my team and I need to go out and figure out how to run a retrofit training program. But let's find the best people who do that, bring them to Brownsville, and plug them into an infrastructure that can connect people in Brownsville who need work and want that kind of training to the best people who can offer it.
Right. So that's, are you optimistic about the future? Let me just also ask about families. Your work is basically with single individuals, not in Brownsville or Hartford, but the homeless off the street.
Right. Yes. There about 1,000 families were housed through the 100,000 Homes campaign. But fortunately, you do not see in most parts of the country families living on the street, and that was the orientation of the 100,000 Homes campaign. But with Brownsville and with Hartford, that's very much about families and helping families to thrive.
Right. So are you going to be able to have a country? One of the things you said was, we're never going to get rid of homelessness until we know the names of the homeless person. That really struck me as the personal kind of relationship and personal concern that I think your program has, your programs, all of them.
And it's something that all of these communities who have participated in the campaign learned and really embrace as well, that these big problems that seem so daunting to us, we have to make them actionable, and we have to make them personal, and we have to make them relational. That's where you begin to see change.
So it's common sense a lot. Common sense and empathy.
Yeah, empathy, good data, and a commitment to just getting better and better all the time.
Yeah, it's it's just such a comment about a world that has people who have no homes.
Yeah.
You've been abroad, and you're also considered to be internationally recognized as an expert in this. Have you helped other communities, or are there other countries that have more successfully housed homeless people?
Well, we've been providing assistance to colleagues and local governments and state governments in Australia for a couple of years now, and also starting to in Canada, and have been asked to assist groups in Ireland and in Belgium. And so we've begun offering some of the types of training and coaching that we have proven out here internationally. And we've also had kind of a long-standing relationship with groups in Japan, interestingly, who wanted to learn from the supportive housing model. And without a doubt, it makes a huge difference if a country has universal health care. That takes a whole lot of these issues right off the table, and has a commitment to actually kind of allocating their assisted housing in a way that is not simply about lotteries and the like, but is much more intentional. So those are two learnings from our work internationally. We've learned a lot, and I'd say probably learned more than we've taught from some of the work that's gone on in Great Britain over the years, and countries where there's just been a different kind of, I think, sense of what the effective role of government can be.
Well, I thank you, Rosanne. It's so inspiring, and I certainly hope that you achieve all the goals that you set at each step. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.